not about you seems an odd choice for an evening where, a memoirist is invited. Um, uh, I'm used to being in these situations, though. Memoir, for me, began when I was 16 years old, and I was living in I grew up in this little town, Paris, Missouri, 1,200 people, and I didn't know any writers. I had never been around anybody who wrote. I, you know, I just had no literary experience, and but I got my driver's license, and and I read in the newspaper that 50 miles away in Columbia, Missouri, Maya Angelou was going to be speaking at Stevens College, which was a school for young ladies, and and so I got myself together and I drove over to see Maya Angelou just because I hadn't read the book. I liked the title, really. I thought it was a really good title, and I was blown away. I was so blown away by this woman, and I was just in maybe you only get that in adolescence. Maybe it's hormonal. But she was there for 3 days, and I went every day. And on the last day, she lost her glasses. And, people were kind of drifting out of the auditorium, and it was like, Miss Angelou has lost her glasses. Call the fire department. And I was like, I'm going to find those glasses, and we are going to be friends forever. And yeah, I did. I found them. And before I gave them back to her, I put them on. I am and we didn't get to be friends forever. But she signed my poster, and she signed it "Joy!" exclamation, which seemed kind of disappointing. I kind of wanted something like several paragraphs. But 10 years later, when I was at Boston College in graduate school, I went to hear her again. And I had my poster dry mounted, and I drug along that same old poster, and I gave her the poster, thinking she would be very touched. She looked at me like, "What are you white people up to now?" She wrote "and perseverance," and I needed it. I really needed it. So you see, memoir. There were books. There were books that you read for the story. There were books that you read for the history or the information or whatever. But there were what I called my friend books. And Maya was my friend, for a long time. And Joan became my friend. She was a more difficult friend. But, I smoked unfiltered Pall Malls at the University of Missouri for the first 6 months because Joan didn't smoke them. They have filters and the tobacco comes out at the end. And if your mouth is dry, they stick to your teeth. And it's like your teeth looks like they're growing hairs. I was quite a freshman. But anyway, Memoir really introduced me, this kid from the country, to, Edward Said, the world, really. I had not been anywhere, and I went with my friends. But as the years passed and I became an editor, and I watched my books be reviewed, or I heard conversations, I definitely got a sense that Memoir is suspect. Because even though sitting down and telling your story, this happened to me, is the most natural thing on earth, it is at the same time something that we really don't want to allow other people to do. We don't exactly, we're very, very conscious that people say too much about themselves, or that some kind of narcissism or solipsism creeps into the experience, and it becomes a self-centered exercise. So if you decide that you are going to write a memoir, I think that those words, "not about you," hang heavy in the air almost all the time you go to do your work. I didn't decide to write a memoir. I didn't decide to write as personally as I did. It just kind of occurred. I had lost my job, and I went home for my mother's 90th birthday. And my mother and I had an agreement that she could only drive to the grocery store, to church, and to the bridge club in our town, which was like, maybe 3 blocks. And, but she had broken her promise. And on a Sunday, she drove 12 miles away to a bridge game. And after the bridge game, she went to McDonald's with the ladies and did a hell of a fender bender, and they brought her home in a police car. And she lost her driver's license. And so I came home, and the housekeeper told me. Betty wouldn't tell me. The housekeeper said that my mother had her out trying to practice for her to retake her driver's test. And, she was, it just wasn't going to happen. And my mother was motion. My mother was America, an American woman of her time. She lived in the car. If she was depressed, she got in the car. If she drove. She drove me, and we went many places. We didn't stay home, and so this loss, this first little death, really struck me, and I decided that I was going to stay home with her for a while and try and help her, and this memory came into my head. And I was an only child. I grew up in my first town was this little town called Madison, Missouri, which is 528 people. And when I was growing up there in the late 60s, they didn't have a kindergarten there yet. And my parents, I guess, sort of got the idea that they had a problem on their hands. And they realized that they were like, we've got to get this kid into some sort of a situation where he can mix with others. So they paid tuition for me to go to kindergarten at a nearby town. And the notion was that my mother would drive me to the county line where I would meet the school bus. But every morning, and I began to remember this so well, I could see this picture of my mother with her summer blonde hair and a Kent cigarette and looking into the mirror and trying to get her look together. And there I would be in the doorway looking in with my Beatles lunchbox. Mother, it's time to go. It's time to go. No, we paid tuition. We paid tuition. As if the fact that we paid tuition meant that we could go whenever we wanted to. I would usually go into the other room and eat my lunch. But I always remember, it was like, all of a sudden, I don't know what, some alarm would go off in her head, and my mother would reach down and grab me and turn me around, and we'd head to the car. She'd rush to the car, and she took her shoe off. She'd always put her bare foot on the gas. We listened to KXOK St. Louis. Johnny Rabbit was the DJ. I thought I was Diana Ross. Petula Clark, the Righteous Brothers. My first literary achievement was knowing the words to the songs. And my mother would put her foot on the gas, and we would just fly to that county line. And so the memoir, writing the memoir was never really, it wasn't a chosen thing. It was, I had a scene. I wrote it down. I don't know why I wrote it down. But then I began practicing more and more and more. I began to take more and more down, and I realized that I was writing a memoir, whether I wanted to or not. And what got me into it was not me, but my mother. And I also, the book went through various stages. The first stage was me basically just following my mother around and trying to capture the experience of someone who was fighting dementia, and trying to honor that and find the line between what I could show and what she wouldn't want me to show. I wanted to be real, but I couldn't be really real. When my agent in New York looked at the manuscript, she said that I had to be more in the book. They had to know who was telling the story. And I wrote those scenes in second person in italics when I added myself, because I was so inhibited about writing about myself. And I read a review, Janet Maslin reviewed a book called Night Film by the woman who wrote Calamity Physics, and she criticized her using too much italics. So I realized I had to take them out of italics. And when I took them out of italics, I had to put them in first person. I think I may be going on too long. Is it okay? Okay. And so the book really, they found that nice quote, the magic of writing a book has never lost its luster for me. I have always thought that finding and that creation is such a magical journey. And I think that even if you are writing a memoir and it is about you, and mine turned out to be about me as well as my mother, it's also mostly what the book wants it to be. It's about the book, and it's about the place, and it's also finally about what I always think this book means to me, and I think memoir is a treasure box, and you can put all the things in it that you have loved all your whole life, whether it's a dog or the way a day looked when you were a little kid, or something your grandmother baked. It can all go in your magic box. And so, the next time you hear some all-knowing literary person put down memoir, tell them to put on Maya Angelou's glasses.